The steady drone of engines filled the cabin of Southwest Airlines Flight 2738 as it cruised at 38,000 feet somewhere over the vast expanse of northern Nevada. Captain Eliza Reeves glanced at the fuel gauge with growing concern. The digital display showed numbers that didn't align with her flight plan calculations. According to her estimates, they should have had at least another hour and a half of fuel to reach Seattle. But the gauge indicated they were burning through their reserves at an alarming rate. "Something's not right," she muttered to First Officer James Chun, who was handling the controls while she reviewed the data. Chun's expression remained stoic, but his eyes revealed his concern. "I've been noticing unusual pressure fluctuations in Engine 2. Could be related." The late September sky outside had begun to darken prematurely as towering storm clouds gathered to the northwest. Weather reports had predicted some turbulence, but nothing severe enough to warrant a route change. Now the massive wall of cumulonimbus clouds looming ahead cast an ominous shadow over their flight path. In the main cabin, Flight Attendant Marissa Torres moved efficiently through the narrow aisle, collecting trash from the 137 passengers who had settled into the routine of a cross-country flight. Some worked on laptops, others dozed with travel pillows tucked under their chins, and a few chatted quietly with their seatmates. The gentle vibration of the aircraft and the monotonous hum of the engines had lulled most into a sense of security that Marissa knew could be disrupted at any moment. Among the passengers, Sarah Donovan sat in seat 14C, staring out at the darkening horizon. The 34-year-old journalist was heading to Seattle to cover a tech conference, her mind preoccupied with the presentation she would need to deliver to her editor upon her return to Boston. The deadline pressure had been mounting, and this trip represented both an opportunity and a challenge. Next to her, a vacant middle seat provided a small luxury of extra space, while the aisle seat was occupied by a man in his 60s who had introduced himself as Dr. Alan Peterson, a retired geology professor returning home after visiting his daughter in Phoenix. "Looks like we might hit some weather," Dr. Peterson remarked, gesturing towards Sarah's window. Sarah nodded, watching as the first droplets of rain began to streak across the double-paned glass. "I just hope we land on time. I have an interview scheduled first thing tomorrow morning." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden lurch of the aircraft. The fasten seatbelt sign illuminated with a soft chime, and Marissa's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. Please return to your seats and secure your seatbelts. We're expecting some turbulence as we navigate around a storm system." In the cockpit, Captain Reeves watched as the fuel pressure indicator for Engine 2 flashed red. A warning tone sounded through their headsets. "We're losing fuel pressure in Engine 2, Chun reported, his fingers dancing across the control panel. "And the leak detection system is showing positive for a fuel line rupture in the right wing." Eliza felt her training kick in, pushing aside the initial surge of adrenaline. "Request immediate diversion clearance. We need to get this bird on the ground." She reached for the radio as Chun began the emergency procedures checklist. "Air traffic control, this is Southwest 2738. We have a fuel leak in our right wing and need immediate clearance for emergency landing. Requesting vectors to the nearest suitable airport." The controller's voice crackled back after a brief pause. "Southwest 2738. Copy your emergency. Nearest suitable airport is Elko Regional, bearing 095, distance 78 miles. Eliza did a quick mental calculation. At their current rate of fuel loss, 78 miles might be pushing their limits. "Air traffic control, can you confirm any closer alternatives? We're experiencing significant fuel loss. Stand by. Southwest 2738. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity before the controller returned. "Southwest 2738. We're showing a small municipal airfield, Copper Basin Regional, bearing 043, distance 42 miles. Limited facilities but sufficient runway length for your aircraft." Chun frowned, glancing at his navigation display. "Copper Basin? I don't see it on our charts. It might be too small to be in our database," Eliza replied, already beginning their descent, and turned toward the coordinates provided. "ATC, Southwest 2738. We'll take Copper Basin. Please provide approach vectors and runway information." As they began their emergency descent, the plane shuddered again, more violently this time. In the cabin, oxygen masks dropped from overhead compartments as the aircraft rapidly depressurized. Passengers gasped and reached frantically for the yellow masks, some crying out in fear while others remained eerily silent, frozen in shock. Sarah Donovan pulled her mask over her face with trembling hands, exchanging a worried glance with Dr. Peterson, who seemed surprisingly calm as he secured his own mask. Through the window, she could see that they were now flying through thick clouds, occasional flashes of lightning illuminating the turbulent gray masses surrounding them. The aircraft banked sharply to the right, descending through layers of dense cloud cover. The turbulence intensified, causing luggage to shift in the overhead bins and unsecured items to slide across tray tables and floors. A flight attendant's voice, muffled through an oxygen mask, attempted to provide reassurance over the intercom, but the words were largely drowned out by the sounds of the struggling aircraft and the anxious murmurs of passengers. In the cockpit, Eliza and Chun worked methodically through their emergency procedures. Engine 2 had now completely failed, forcing them to compensate with adjustments to their remaining engine and control surfaces. The fuel indicator continued its alarming decline as they descended through 20,000 feet, ATC Southwest 2738. We've lost Engine 2 and continuing emergency descent. Request runway and weather information for Copper Basin. The controller's voice returned, now tinged with static as they lost altitude. Southwest 2738, Copper Basin has a single runway, 0927, length 7,500 feet. Surface is asphalt, condition unknown. Weather reporting limited but showing clear below cloud layer at 8,000 feet. No tower control, you'll be making a visual approach. Emergency services have been notified. Chun looked increasingly concerned as he scanned his displays. Still not showing on any of our navigation systems. Are we sure about these coordinates? We don't have a choice, Eliza replied grimly, focusing on maintaining their descent rate while conserving what little fuel remained. ATC wouldn't send us to coordinates without an airfield. As they broke through the cloud layer at 7,500 feet, the Nevada landscape sprawled beneath them, a vast expanse of high desert dotted with sagebrush and cut by dry riverbeds. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the terrain, highlighting the contours of small mountain ranges in the distance. But as they continued their descent, following the coordinates provided, something was clearly wrong. I don't see any airfield, Chun said, voicing what was becoming increasingly apparent. No runway, no facilities, nothing. Eliza scanned the horizon frantically, looking for any sign of the promised airfield. ATC Southwest 2738. We've descended below the cloud layer but do not have visual on Copper Basin Airfield. Please confirm coordinates. The radio crackled with static. Southwest 2738, coordinates confirmed. Copper Basin should be directly ahead at your current heading. But as they descended through 5,000 feet, the barren landscape below offered no sign of human development, let alone an airport capable of handling a commercial airliner. The fuel warning now blared constantly, indicating less than 15 minutes of flight time remaining. We need to make a decision, Eliza stated firmly. Either we continue to Elko or ... Her voice trailed off as Chun suddenly pointed through the windshield. There, 2 o'clock, about 10 miles out. Some kind of straight line across the desert. Eliza squinted, focusing on where Chun was pointing. In the distance, barely visible against the reddish-brown landscape, was what appeared to be a straight, dark line stretching across the desert floor. It wasn't marked with the standard runway indicators, and there were no visible structures or control tower nearby, but it was flat, straight, and appeared to be long enough. ATC Southwest 2738. We have visual on what appears to be a landing strip at the approximate Copper Basin coordinates. Proceeding with emergency landing. Be advised there are no visible facilities or control tower. With no time for a proper approach pattern, Eliza aligned the aircraft directly with the mysterious strip. The fuel gauge now showed critical levels, the engine sputtering as it struggled to maintain power. In the cabin, Sarah Donovan gripped the armrests, her knuckles white with tension. The ground was rapidly approaching through her window, the details of the landscape becoming clearer with each passing second. She could now see what appeared to be a long, dark strip stretching across the desert floor, not the concrete runway of a conventional airport, but something else entirely. Brace for impact, Marissa's voice commanded over the intercom. Heads down, stay down. The aircraft's landing gear deployed with a heavy thud, and Eliza fought to keep their approach stable as they descended the final few hundred feet. The mysterious strip grew larger in their view, revealing itself to be not the asphalt runway they'd been promised, but what appeared to be an abandoned stretch of highway or perhaps some kind of old military installation, half reclaimed by the desert. With a jarring thud, the wheels touched down on the surface, which was significantly rougher than a maintained runway. The aircraft bounced once, twice, then settled onto its landing gear as Eliza deployed thrust reversers and applied maximum braking force. Dust and debris swirled around the plane as it barreled down the mysterious strip, gradually losing speed. When the aircraft finally came to a complete stop, an eerie silence fell over the cabin. The engine died completely, having consumed the last drops of fuel. Through the windows, passengers could see only the desolate Nevada desert stretching in all directions. No terminal building, no control tower, no emergency vehicles rushing to their aid. Just endless sagebrush and sand under the darkening sky, with a strange, abandoned strip of pavement beneath their wheels. Captain Eliza Reeves unclipped her harness and stood shakily, exchanging a bewildered look with First Officer Chun. "Where the hell are we?" she whispered. Chun shook his head slowly, staring out at the barren landscape surrounding them. "I don't know, but this is definitely not Copper Basin Regional Airport." As they prepared to address their frightened passengers, neither pilot realized that their emergency landing had just become the beginning of a much stranger journey. one that would lead them to uncover secrets long buried beneath the Nevada desert, in a place that officially didn't exist. Twilight descended rapidly over the Nevada desert as the passengers of Southwest Flight 2738 gathered on the cracked pavement of what was clearly not a functioning airport. The temperature had begun to drop, the day's heat dissipating into the vast sky above. Captain Eliza Reeves stood before the assembled group, her uniform jacket buttoned against the growing chill, trying to project a calm she didn't entirely feel. "First and foremost, I want to commend everyone for your composure during our emergency landing," she began, her voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "We're all safe, and that's what matters most. We've established communication with Southwest Airlines headquarters, and they're coordinating with local authorities to arrange transportation from this location." The location in question remained a mystery. The strip they had landed on extended for about a mile in either direction, long enough for their landing, but not what anyone would classify as an actual airport. It appeared to be an abandoned stretch of asphalt, perhaps an old highway or test track, its surface cracked and weathered by years of desert sun and seasonal flash floods. No buildings were visible in any direction, just the vast expanse of sagebrush and rocky outcroppings stretching toward distant mountains. "What about Copper Basin Airport?" called out a middle-aged man in a business suit, his tie loosened and face flushed with agitation. "The pilot said we were landing at an airport." First Officer Chun stepped forward. "Air traffic control directed us to coordinates for what they identified as Copper Basin Regional Airport. As you can see, there's no such facility at this location. We're working to determine exactly where we are and why we were directed here." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as passengers exchanged worried glances. The sun had now dipped below the western mountains, casting long shadows across the desert floor. Without city lights to compete with, stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky with unusual brilliance. Sarah Donovan stood slightly apart from the main group, her journalist's instincts fully engaged. She'd been taking photos with her phone since exiting the aircraft, documenting the strange landing strip and the surrounding landscape. Something about this situation felt wrong beyond the obvious emergency landing. There was an underlying mystery that nagged at her professional curiosity. Dr. Alan Peterson had remained close by, his academic mind similarly intrigued by their predicament. "This doesn't make sense," he remarked quietly to Sarah. "AXI wouldn't direct a commercial aircraft to a non-existent facility, especially not in an emergency situation, unless they genuinely believed there was an airport here," Sarah replied, scanning the horizon. "Or unless she was interrupted by Flight Attendant Marissa Torres, who was organizing passengers into groups based on their needs. Families with small children, elderly passengers, and those with medical conditions were being gathered near the aircraft where they could be sheltered from the increasingly cold night air. "We need everyone to conserve phone batteries," Marissa announced. "Use them only for essential communications. The emergency locator transmitter on the aircraft is active, but cell service out here is extremely limited." Sarah checked her phone. No signal bars appeared in the upper corner of her screen. She slipped it into her pocket, opting to save the battery as suggested. As night fully enveloped the desert, the temperature continued to drop. Flight crew had distributed emergency blankets from the aircraft, their metallic surfaces gleaming in the moonlight as passengers huddled together for warmth. The pilots and flight attendants had organized a rotation for passengers to re-enter the aircraft in groups to warm up, as the desert night was proving colder than many had anticipated. Captain Reeves conferred with her crew near the nose of the aircraft, their expressions serious as they spoke in hushed tones. Sarah edged closer, catching fragments of their conversation. "Said rescue vehicle should have been here by now. No update from headquarters on our exact position. Strange interference on the radio." The conversation ceased as they noticed Sarah's approach. Eliza turned to her with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Can we help you, Ms. Donovan?" "Sarah Donovan. I'm a journalist with The Atlantic." She decided transparency was the best approach. "Captain, is it possible we've landed in a restricted area? The lack of response from local authorities seems unusual, especially for an emergency landing of a commercial aircraft." Eliza exchanged glances with Chun before responding carefully. "We're considering all possibilities, Ms. Donovan. Our primary concern is the safety and comfort of our passengers until rescue arrives." "Of course," Sarah nodded. "But as someone who's covered stories in this region before, I know that parts of Nevada contain restricted military installations. Some aren't even acknowledged officially." Chun's expression tightened. "We were directed here by air traffic control. Whatever this place is, it was in their system as Copper Basin Regional. An airport that doesn't exist," Sarah mused. "Wouldn't be the first time the government has created phantom locations on official maps." Before the conversation could continue, a shout came from a group of passengers who had wandered about 50 yards from the aircraft. "Hey, there's something over here." Sarah turned to see a young man in his 20s waving frantically. Beside him, another passenger was shining a flashlight app from his phone toward the ground. Captain Reeves immediately headed in their direction, with Chun, Sarah, and Dr. Peterson following close behind. As they approached, Sarah saw that the men had discovered what appeared to be a metal hatch or door embedded in the desert floor, partially obscured by sand and scrub vegetation. It was roughly circular, perhaps 3 feet in diameter, with no visible handle or opening mechanism. Its surface, though weathered, reflected the phone's light with a dull metallic sheen. "What the hell is that?" the younger man asked, looking up as the captain approached. "Doctor." Peterson knelt beside the hatch, brushing away sand with his hand. "This is manufactured, obviously, and relatively recent, I'd guess within the last 50 years based on the material and weathering patterns." His geological expertise lent weight to his assessment. "There's something written here," he continued, clearing more sand from the surface. Faded but still legible letters emerged. CBR-17. CB, Sarah repeated. "Copper Basin?" Captain Reeves frowned. "Please step back, everyone. We don't know what this is, and I don't want anyone touching unknown objects." As the small group reluctantly backed away, another passenger called out from about 20 yards further along the strip. "There's another one over here." Within minutes, passengers had discovered 5 more similar hatches at regular intervals along the edge of the landing strip. Each bore similar markings, CBR followed by a number. "This isn't a coincidence," Sarah said, her journalistic instincts firing on all cylinders. "This strip wasn't built as a road or highway. It was designed as a landing strip, just not a commercial one." Dr. Peterson nodded in agreement. "And these access points suggest something beneath us, possibly. A bunker or underground facility." The implications hung in the air as they stood in the chilly desert night, surrounded by mysteries that seemed to multiply with each passing minute. Whatever Copper Basin was, it clearly wasn't the municipal airport that air traffic control had described. Their speculation was interrupted by a distant sound, a low, rhythmic thumping that gradually increased in volume. Chun was the first to identify it. "Helicopters," he said, pointing toward the eastern horizon where no lights were visible despite the growing sound. "Military from the sound of them. And they're running dark." Within minutes, the sound had grown to an unmistakable roar. Wind began to whip across the desert floor as 2 Black Hawk helicopters appeared overhead, their forms barely visible against the night sky with no running lights to mark their presence. As they descended, powerful spotlights suddenly blazed to life from their undersides, illuminating the aircraft and the scattered passengers in harsh white light. The helicopters landed approximately 100 yards from the Southwest aircraft, their rotors continuing to spin as the side doors slid open. Figures emerged, at least a dozen men in tactical gear carrying what appeared to be automatic weapons. They moved with military precision, forming a perimeter around the helicopters as a single individual detached from the group and approached the assembled passengers. As the person drew closer, Sarah could see it was a woman in her 50s, wearing a dark suit rather than tactical gear. Her silver-gray hair was cut in a practical bob, and she carried herself with unmistakable authority. When she reached the group, she addressed Captain Reeves directly. "Captain, I'm Director Catherine Harlow with the Department of Defense. I understand you've had quite an unusual emergency landing." Her tone was professional but betrayed no sympathy. "We need to move quickly. All passengers and crew will be transported to a secure facility where you'll receive medical attention if needed and temporary accommodations." Eliza stepped forward, positioning herself protectively between the government official and her passengers. "Director Harlow, I need some explanation before I allow my passengers to be transported anywhere. We were directed to these coordinates by air traffic control, told it was a municipal airport called Copper Basin Regional." Clearly, that information was incorrect. The director's expression remained impassive. "I understand your concerns, Captain, but I'm not at liberty to provide detailed explanations at this time. What I can tell you is that you've landed in a restricted area, and national security protocols require immediate evacuation and debriefing." "National security?" Sarah interjected, stepping forward. "So this is a military installation?" Director Harlow's gaze shifted to Sarah, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And you are?" "Sarah Donovan, journalist with The Atlantic." A flicker of something recognition, perhaps, or concern crossed the director's face before her professional mask returned. "Ms. Donovan, all your questions will be addressed during debriefing. For now, our priority is moving everyone to a secure location before temperatures drop further." As if to emphasize her point, a gust of cold wind swept across the landing strip, causing passengers to pull their emergency blankets tighter around their shoulders. The desert night had become truly cold, with temperatures likely approaching freezing, a dangerous situation for people dressed for air travel rather than desert survival. Captain Reeves surveyed her shivering passengers before turning back to the director. "We'll cooperate with evacuation, but I want your assurance that my passengers will be treated with respect and returned to their intended destinations as quickly as possible." "You have my word," Director Harlow replied. "Now please organize your passengers into groups of 8. The helicopters will shuttle everyone to the facility in multiple trips." As the evacuation began, Sarah found herself in the first group alongside Dr. Peterson, Marissa Torres, and 5 other passengers. They were escorted to the nearest helicopter by armed personnel who remained professionally detached, neither threatening nor particularly helpful. Inside the helicopter, there were no windows, only bench seating along the walls. Once they were secured with harnesses, the door slid shut, plunging them into near darkness illuminated only by dim red interior lights. The roar of the rotors increased as the helicopter lifted off, making conversation impossible without the headsets that their military escorts wore, but had not offered to the passengers. Sarah tried to maintain her sense of direction as the helicopter banked and turned, but without visual references, it was impossible to know where they were headed. She checked her phone again, still no signal, and now the battery had dropped to 15% despite her conservative use. After approximately 20 minutes of flight, she felt the helicopter begin its descent. When the door finally slid open, Sarah was momentarily blinded by bright floodlights. As her eyes adjusted, she found herself looking at what appeared to be a large hangar door built into the side of a mountain, now open to reveal a cavernous interior space. Military personnel helped them disembark and led them through the hangar door into a long concrete corridor. The temperature inside was a comfortable contrast to the desert night, but the institutional appearance, gray walls, fluorescent lighting, and numbered doors, gave the facility an unsettling quality. They were led to a large room that resembled a conference center, with rows of tables and chairs, a refreshment area stocked with water and basic snacks, and several doors leading to what appeared to be smaller meeting rooms. Other officials in civilian clothing waited inside, clipboards and tablets in hand. "Welcome to Copper Basin," announced one of them, a man in his 40s wearing a government tissue suit similar to Director Harlow's. "You'll be processed individually for debriefing. When your name is called, please proceed to one of the interview rooms. While you wait, refreshments are available and basic toiletry kits can be found at the back table." "Processed," Dr. Peterson muttered to Sarah. "They make it sound like we're incoming inventory." Sarah nodded, her journalistic instincts shifting into high gear despite her fatigue. Notice he called it Copper Basin, so there is a real facility with that name, just not an airport. As they spoke, more passengers began to arrive from subsequent helicopter trips. Captain Reeves and First Officer Chun were among the last to enter, immediately seeking out facility officials to continue advocating for their passengers. A woman in a dark pantsuit approached Sarah directly. "Ms. Donovan? I'm Agent Celia Winters. Would you please come with me?" Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Dr. Peterson before following the agent to one of the side rooms. Inside was a simple table with 2 chairs, a computer terminal, and a camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling. "Please have a seat," Agent Winters gestured to one of the chairs. "I understand you're a journalist with The Atlantic." Sarah sat down, maintaining eye contact with the agent. "That's correct. Is that why I'm being interviewed first?" Agent Winters offered a thin smile as she took the seat opposite. "We're conducting interviews in an order that optimizes our processing efficiency. Now, I need to inform you that this conversation falls under national security protocols. You'll be required to sign non-disclosure agreements before departing our facility." "I'm not signing anything." "Without legal counsel," Sarah replied calmly. "That is your right," the agent acknowledged without missing a beat. "However, refusing to sign will significantly complicate and delay your departure from this facility." Sarah considered her options. Pushing back too hard might limit her access to information, but complete compliance would compromise her journalistic integrity. She decided on a middle approach. "I understand the sensitivity of the situation, Agent Winters. I'm willing to discuss what happened today and to consider reasonable confidentiality requests, but I won't agree to blanket non-disclosure without understanding exactly what I'm being asked to keep confidential." The agent studied her for a moment before nodding slightly. "Fair enough. Let's begin with your observations. What did you notice about the landing site before our arrival?" For the next hour, Sarah carefully navigated the interview, sharing factual observations while avoiding speculation or conclusions. She mentioned the hatches they'd discovered, but framed them as curious findings rather than evidence of a particular theory. Throughout, Agent Winters took notes on her tablet, occasionally asking clarifying questions but revealing nothing about the nature of the facility or why their plane had been directed there. As the interview concluded, Agent Winters set her tablet aside. "Thank you for your cooperation, Ms. Donovan. You'll be escorted to temporary quarters where you can rest. We anticipate completing all passenger interviews within 24 hours. After which arrangements will be made for continued transportation." "Can you tell me anything about this facility?" Sarah asked directly. "The public has a right to know why a commercial airliner was directed to a restricted military installation during an emergency." For the first time, Agent Winters' professional demeanor showed a brief flicker of what might have been sympathy or conflict. "What I can tell you off the record is that there has been a significant miscommunication between systems. The details of that miscommunication are being investigated." She stood, indicating the interview was over. "A security officer will escort you to the residential section. As Sarah was led through more identical corridors, she noticed that the facility was far larger than it had initially appeared, with multiple levels accessible by elevators requiring keycard access. The residential section turned out to be a floor of small but comfortable rooms, resembling basic hotel accommodations, each with a twin bed, private bathroom, desk, and chair. No windows, no television, no phone, and most notably no Wi-Fi or cellular service. A paper notice on the desk informed occupants that meals would be served in a common area down the hall at specified times, and that a representative would contact them when transportation arrangements were finalized. At the bottom was a curious note: for security purposes, please do not attempt to navigate the facility unescorted. All areas are under surveillance, and unauthorized access will result in extended detention. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the exhaustion of the day's events. Her phone battery had now dipped below 10%, and with no way to charge it, she decided to power it off completely to preserve whatever capacity remained. Before doing so, she used the last of her battery to make detailed notes about everything she had observed, from the emergency landing to the facility's layout and her interview with Agent Winters. Whatever Copper Basin was, it clearly involved significant government resources and secrecy. The question that continued to trouble her was whether their emergency landing had truly been an accident, miscommunication between systems, as Agent Winters had suggested, or whether something more deliberate had occurred. As she lay back on the bed, too tired to even remove her shoes, Sarah's last conscious thought before drifting into sleep was of the strange metal hatches along the landing strip, and what might lie beneath the Nevada desert at a place that, according to official records, didn't exist. Sarah Donovan awoke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. The room was pitch dark, with no windows to provide natural light and no digital clock to display the time. She fumbled for her phone on the bedside table before remembering she had powered it off to preserve the battery. Instead, she found a small touch lamp, which illuminated the room with a soft glow when she tapped its base. According to her watch, it was 6:27 a.m., though whether that remained accurate after yesterday's events was uncertain. She had slept in her clothes, which were now wrinkled and uncomfortable. A quick investigation of the room revealed a small dresser containing basic toiletries and a change of clothes, generic sweats, t-shirts, and undergarments in approximately her size. The government preparedness was both impressive and unsettling. After a hot shower and change of clothes, Sarah felt marginally more human. She was contemplating her next move when a knock came at the door. Opening it, she found Dr. Alan Peterson standing in the hallway, similarly dressed in government-issued casual wear. "Good morning," or whatever time it actually is, he greeted her with a wry smile. "They're serving breakfast down the hall. I thought you might like some company in this bizarre situation." Sarah nodded gratefully. "Lead the way. Have you seen any of the other passengers?" "Most of them," Alan replied as they walked down the featureless corridor. "They've been processing people through interviews all night. Some passengers are quite distressed, particularly those with connecting flights or pressing commitments." The dining area turned out to be a cafeteria-style room with about 20 tables. Approximately half of Flight 2738's passengers were present, along with a few facility staff members in civilian clothes who maintained a watchful distance. A buffet line offered surprisingly decent breakfast options: eggs, bacon, fruit, pastries, and coffee. As they filled their plates, Sarah noticed Captain Reeves and First Officer Chun sitting at a corner table deep in conversation. She nudged Dr. Peterson and they made their way over. "Mind if we join you?" Sarah asked. Eliza looked up, her expression guarded but not unwelcoming. "Please do." Dark circles under her eyes suggested she'd had little sleep. "Any updates on when we might be leaving?" Dr. Peterson asked as they sat down. Chun shook his head. "They're being deliberately vague. Transportation arrangements are being finalized is all we keep hearing." "Have they told you anything about what this place actually is?" Sarah kept her voice low, though she suspected the room was likely monitored. Eliza glanced around before responding. "Nothing concrete. I've been pushing for information since we arrived, but they keep deflecting. The most I've gathered is that this is some kind of research facility, and our being here was supposedly an accident. A research facility with military-grade security and underground levels that don't officially exist," Sarah mused. "Doesn't exactly sound like they're studying agricultural methods, whatever they're researching. They're extremely concerned about us having seen it," Chun added. "The debriefing I went through last night focused heavily on what I observed at the landing site, particularly those access hatches we found." Dr. Peterson leaned in. "I've been thinking about those. The markings CBR followed by numbers. If CB stands for Copper Basin, R could indicate research or possibly restricted, or radiation," Chun suggested darkly. Their speculation was interrupted as the cafeteria doors opened and Director Harlow entered, accompanied by two men in dark suits. The facility staff immediately straightened, their casual demeanors shifting to alert attention. The director surveyed the room before approaching their table. "Good morning," she addressed them collectively. "I hope you found your accommodations acceptable. Captain Reeves, First Officer Chun, we have some paperwork regarding your aircraft that requires your attention." Would you please come with me? It wasn't really a request. The pilots exchanged glances before standing. What about our passengers? Eliza asked firmly. They deserve information about when they'll be able to continue their journeys. We're working on transportation. Arrangements now, Director Harlow replied with practiced ease. An announcement will be made to all passengers later this morning. As the pilots were escorted out, Sarah noticed something she hadn't before, small emblem on the lapel of one of the director's companions. It appeared to be a stylized mountain with some kind of geometric pattern overlay. Did you see that pin? She whispered to Dr. Peterson after the officials had left. He nodded. Reminds me of insignia I've seen associated with certain research divisions of the Department of Energy. They manage quite a few classified facilities in the Nevada desert. Department of Energy, not Defense? Despite what Director Harlow told us, the lines between agencies get blurry in classified projects, he replied. I had a colleague who consulted for the DO years ago. He never discussed specifics, but he mentioned facilities in this region dedicated to advanced research that officially didn't exist in any public record. Their conversation was again interrupted, this time by a facility staff member who approached their table. Ms. Donovan? Doctor? Peterson, your presence is requested for additional debriefing. They were led out of the cafeteria and down a series of corridors different from those Sarah had traversed the previous night. She tried to mentally map their route. 2 right turns, a left, down an elevator to what appeared to be level 3 according to the button panel, then through a security checkpoint where their escort used a keycard and entered a code on a keypad. The area beyond the checkpoint had a distinctly different feel, more clinical and technical than the residential section. The walls were lined with what appeared to be laboratories or research spaces, visible through glass partitions. Most were empty this early in the morning, but a few contained staff in white lab coats working at computer stations or with equipment Sarah didn't recognize. What kind of research do you conduct here? She asked their escort conversationally. I'm not authorized to discuss facility operations, came the practice response. Please continue to follow me. They were led to a conference room where Agent Winters waited, along with a man Sarah hadn't seen before, older, perhaps in his 60s, with a weathered face and alert eyes that suggested military background despite his civilian clothes. Thank you for joining us, Agent Winters began once they were seated. This is Dr. Marcus Blackwood, the scientific director of this facility. Dr. Blackwood nodded in acknowledgement but didn't offer to shake hands. I understand you've both taken a particular interest in the nature of our installation here. His direct approach caught Sarah off guard, but she recovered quickly. When a commercial airliner makes an emergency landing at a facility that doesn't officially exist, it naturally raises questions, especially when that facility appears to have been designed to accommodate such landings, Dr. Peterson added. Those hatches we found were evenly spaced along what was clearly an intentional runway, not just some abandoned stretch of road. Dr. Blackwood studied them both for a moment before responding. You're both correct, of course. The strip where your aircraft landed was indeed designed for that purpose, though not for commercial traffic. It's one of several emergency landing sites maintained by the government in remote locations. For what purpose? Sarah pressed. National security, he replied simply, offering no further elaboration. Agent Winters opened a folder on the table. We've reviewed your backgrounds, Dr. Peterson. Your geological expertise has been noted, Miss Donovan. Your journalistic focus on government transparency and classified programs is of particular interest to us. Sarah felt a chill. That had nothing to do with the room's temperature. You've been investigating us? Standard procedure for anyone with access to sensitive locations, Dr. Blackwood interjected. Which brings me to the purpose of this meeting. We find ourselves in a delicate situation. Your aircraft's emergency landing has created a security breach that we must address. The question is how to proceed in a manner that respects your rights while protecting national interests. Are we being detained? Sarah asked directly. No, Agent Winters replied. You're guests who happen to arrive through unusual circumstances. However, your departure requires certain assurances regarding discretion. Dr. Blackwood leaned forward. I'm authorized to offer you a proposal, rather than having you sign standard non-disclosure agreements, which I suspect would meet with resistance, particularly from Miss Donovan. We're prepared to provide you with a controlled tour of certain non-critical sections of our facility. Sarah exchanged a surprised glance with Dr. Peterson. This was not what she had expected. Why would you do that? She asked suspiciously. Because partial transparency can sometimes be more effective than complete secrecy, Dr. Blackwood replied, particularly when dealing with individuals who are likely to pursue the truth regardless. We would rather you leave here with accurate information about what we do than with wild speculation that could lead to inappropriate conclusions. And in return, Dr. Peterson asked cautiously, in return you agree to submit any material you might publish about this experience for security review before release, not for censorship of opinions or conclusions, but strictly to ensure no classified technologies or operations are compromised. Sarah considered this carefully. As a journalist, she had strong reservations about government review of her work. However, the opportunity to see inside a classified facility that officially didn't exist was unprecedented. I need assurances that all passengers from our flight will be safely transported to their destinations without undue delay or pressure, she countered. Already in progress, Agent Winters responded. Transportation has been arranged to deliver all passengers to Las Vegas McCarran International Airport later today, where Southwest Airlines has flights ready to accommodate everyone to their final destinations. And the review process for anything I might write? Sarah continued. What's the time frame, and who makes the final determination? 72-hour maximum review period, Dr. Blackwood stated. Final determination rests with the joint DoD security panel, but again, only regarding classified technical details, not your overall reporting or conclusions. After further negotiation of terms, Sarah and Dr. Peterson agreed to the proposal. Dr. Blackwood seemed pleased, though it was difficult to read his stoic expression. Excellent. We'll begin the tour immediately, as we need to complete it before passenger transportation departs at noon. They were led deeper into the facility, passing through another security checkpoint that required biometric verification from Dr. Blackwood. Beyond this point, the clinical atmosphere intensified. The corridors were wider, the ceiling higher, and the number of research spaces visible through glass partitions increased. Copper Basin Research Facility was established in 1983, Dr. Blackwood explained as they walked. Its primary mission has evolved over the years, but has always centered on advanced energy and propulsion research. Energy and propulsion? Sarah repeated. That's quite vague. Dr. Blackwood offered a thin smile. Deliberately so, Miss Donovan. What I can tell you is that our work here focuses on theoretical physics, applications with potential implications for national security and energy independence. They passed a laboratory where researchers were gathered around what appeared to be a complex apparatus suspended within multiple concentric rings. Dr. Peterson paused, studying it with evident fascination. Is that a tokamak? He asked, referring to a type of device used in nuclear fusion research. Similar in principle, but with significant modifications, Dr. Blackwood replied. We're exploring plasma containment methodologies that differ substantially from conventional approaches. As they continued their tour, Sarah began to understand that whatever research was being conducted at Copper Basin went well beyond conventional science. Some of the equipment and experiments they glimpsed seemed to border on the fantastical devices that manipulated light in ways she'd never seen before. Materials testing chambers where objects appeared to defy gravity, and computer systems displaying mathematical models so complex they resembled abstract art more than scientific notation. How does this relate to the landing strip where our plane touched down? Sarah asked as they rode an elevator even deeper into the facility. Dr. Blackwood hesitated before responding. The surface installation serves multiple purposes. One is indeed emergency landing capability for certain government aircraft. Another is as a testing ground for some of the theoretical propulsion systems we develop here. And the hatches we found? Access points to monitoring and maintenance tunnels. The strip itself contains embedded sensors that measure various atmospheric, and geological conditions relevant to our research. The elevator doors opened to reveal what appeared to be the heart of the facility, an enormous chamber extending at least 3 stories high, with a central platform surrounded by complex equipment and monitoring stations. The platform held what appeared to be a circular apparatus approximately 30 feet in diameter, composed of interlocking segments of a silvery metal Sarah didn't recognize. This is our primary research installation, Dr. Blackwood stated with evident pride. The Quantum Resonance Array. It represents the culmination of nearly 4 decades of theoretical work and practical application. Dr. Peterson whistled softly. This isn't just energy research. You're working with quantum fields on a macroscopic scale, aren't you? Dr. Blackwood gave him an appraising look. Your perception exceeds your credentials, Doctor. Yes, in layman's terms, we're investigating the practical applications of quantum field manipulation at scales previously thought impossible. Sarah tried to process what she was seeing and hearing. Are you saying you're developing some kind of quantum technology for ... What exactly? Weapons? Energy production? All of the above and none specifically, Dr. Blackwood replied cryptically. The potential applications range from unlimited clean energy production to revolutionary transportation systems to defense. Capabilities beyond current paradigms. But we're still very much in the research phase. As they observed the array, technicians moved around the platform, making adjustments and checking readings on various instruments. The atmosphere was one of focused intensity with the kind of purposeful activity Sarah had seen in mission control rooms during space launches. Is it active now? Dr. Peterson asked, gesturing toward the array. No, full activations require extensive preparation and are conducted on a strict schedule. The next test sequence is scheduled for this evening. Dr. Blackwood checked his watch. We should continue. There's one more area I'd like to show you before we conclude the tour. They were led through more security checkpoints to a section that felt older than the rest of the facility, with concrete walls rather than the modern materials used elsewhere. The air here had a different quality, slightly drier, with a faint metallic tang that Sarah found difficult to place. Dr. Blackwood used another keycard to access a large vault-like door. As it swung open with a pneumatic hiss, he turned to them. What you're about to see represents the origin point of our research here at Copper Basin. It's classified at the highest level, but I've received special authorization to show you, given the unusual circumstances of your arrival. Beyond the door was a chamber smaller than the main research area, but somehow more imposing. In its center, suspended within a transparent containment cube, was an object unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Approximately the size of a beach ball, it appeared to be composed of a material that somehow both reflected and absorbed light, creating a visual effect that made it difficult to focus on directly. Its surface seemed to shift and flow despite being apparently solid, with patterns emerging and dissolving as they watched. "What is that?" Sarah whispered, finding herself instinctively speaking quietly in the presence of the strange object. Dr. Blackwood's expression was solemn. "We call it the anomaly. It was discovered in 1978 during a routine geological survey approximately 200 feet beneath where your plane landed yesterday. Everything you've seen in this facility, all our research, all our technological development stems from our attempts to understand this single object." Dr. Peterson had gone pale. "It's not terrestrial, is it?" "That remains undetermined," Dr. Blackwood replied carefully. "Its composition includes elements not found on the periodic table. Its internal structure defies conventional analysis. It emits no radiation by any standard method. Yet it influences quantum fields in ways we're still struggling to comprehend after more than 40 years of study." Sarah found herself unable to look away from the object. There was something deeply unsettling about it, not threatening exactly, but profoundly alien in a way that transcended its unusual appearance. "Why show us this?" she finally asked, turning to Dr. Blackwood. "This goes well beyond offering context for our unexpected landing, because, Miss Donovan, I've reviewed your journalistic work extensively in the past 12 hours. Your reputation for integrity and careful reporting preceded you." He turned to Dr. Peterson. "And your geological expertise gives you the scientific background to appreciate what you're seeing without resorting to sensationalism." He gestured back toward the anomaly. "Whatever you choose to write about your experience here, this object will undoubtedly feature prominently in your thinking. I'd rather you understand its significance from a scientific perspective than leap to more, colorful conclusions." "Are you saying it's not extraterrestrial?" Sarah pressed. "I'm saying we don't know," Dr. Blackwood admitted. "And that uncertainty, that humility in the face of something truly unknown is what drives our work here. Not conspiracy, not weapons development, but the pursuit of understanding something that challenges everything we thought we knew about physics and perhaps our place in the universe." As they stood contemplating the strange object, a sudden alarm began to sound, not the blaring emergency type, but a persistent, rhythmic tone that caused the facility staff to immediately shift their attention to monitoring stations. "What's happening, Doctor?" Peterson asked as researchers began moving with increased urgency around them. Dr. Blackwood checked a small device on his wrist, his expression changing to one of concern. "It appears the anomaly is exhibiting unusual activity patterns. This sometimes occurs, but the timing is unexpected." He turned to Agent Winters. "Please escort our guests back to the residential section immediately." "Is there danger?" Sarah asked, noticing that containment systems around the anomaly appeared to be activating additional layers of protection. "Not immediate danger, no," Dr. Blackwood assured them, though his tone lacked conviction. "But protocol dictates that non-essential personnel clear the research levels during anomalous events." As Agent Winters began leading them toward the exit, Sarah glanced back for a final look at the strange object. For a brief moment, she thought she saw its shifting patterns align into something almost recognizable, something that resembled a geometric configuration not unlike the emblem she'd noticed on the official's lapel earlier. Before she could process this observation, they were hurried through the vault door, which sealed behind them with a definitive thud. The alarm continued to echo through the corridors as they were escorted rapidly back toward the upper levels of the facility. "This happens often?" Sarah asked Agent Winters as they waited for an elevator. "I'm not authorized to discuss operational details," came the predictable response, though Winters' tense posture suggested the situation was not routine. When they reached the residential level, they found it buzzing with activity. Passengers were being organized into groups, with facility staff distributing personal belongings that had been retrieved from the aircraft. Captain Reeves spotted them and made her way over. "There you are. Where have you been?" "They're accelerating our departure schedule. Buses are already waiting to transport everyone to Las Vegas." "Did they say why the sudden rush?" Sarah asked, exchanging a meaningful glance with Dr. Peterson. "Something about weather. Conditions being favorable for transit now, but potentially deteriorating later," Eliza replied skeptically. though the sky looked perfectly clear through the hangar doors when I passed by earlier. Within 30 minutes, all passengers had been processed and were being escorted toward the facility's surface level. Sarah and Dr. Peterson found themselves in the final group, along with the flight crew. As they passed through the main hangar area, Sarah noticed significantly increased activity compared to their arrival. Additional helicopters were landing and taking off, and military personnel moved with heightened purpose. Director Harlow intercepted their group just before they reached the transport buses. "Captain Reeves, Miss Donovan, Dr. Peterson, a moment, please." She led them aside as the remaining passengers boarded the waiting vehicles. "I want to personally thank you for your cooperation during this unusual situation." Her tone formal, but with an underlying tension Sarah hadn't heard before. "As agreed, you'll be transported to Las Vegas, where Southwest Airlines has arrangements to continue your journeys." She handed each of them a business card with only a phone number printed on it. "If you have any questions or concerns after your departure, please use this direct line rather than attempting to contact the facility through other channels. Is everything all right, Director?" Eliza asked directly. "The accelerated evacuation suggests some kind of situation developing." "Everything is under control," Director Harlow replied with practiced reassurance. "We're simply implementing standard protocols in response to scheduled research activities." Sarah noticed that the director's calm demeanor didn't quite reach her eyes, which kept darting toward the inner facility as if expecting developments at any moment. "The anomaly," Sarah said quietly. "It's doing something unusual, isn't it?" Director Harlow's gaze snapped back to her, expression hardening. "You've been granted extraordinary access as a professional courtesy, Ms. Donovan. Don't mistake that for authorization to speculate about classified matters." Before Sarah could respond, a facility staff member approached urgently and whispered something in the director's ear. Her expression remained controlled, but Sarah could see her posture stiffen further. "Your transportation is waiting," Director Harlow stated with finality. "I trust you'll remember our agreement regarding security review of any materials you may publish." As they boarded the last bus, Sarah glanced back at the facility entrance. Additional security personnel had taken positions around the perimeter, and the general sense of urgency had noticeably increased in just the few minutes they'd been outside. The bus doors closed and the convoy began moving away from the facility, traveling along a rough road that eventually connected to what appeared to be an unmarked desert highway. Through the dusty window, Sarah watched as the mountain housing Copper Basin Research Facility receded into the distance, looking like nothing more than another anonymous ridge in the Nevada desert landscape. "Something significant is happening back there," Dr. Peterson murmured beside her, keeping his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Whatever that anomaly is, it's clearly not as contained or understood as Dr. Blackwood wants us to believe," Sarah agreed. "The question is whether we tell that part of the story." As the facility disappeared from view, Sarah thought about the extraordinary sequence of events that had brought them to this moment, an emergency. Landing on a runway that wasn't supposed to exist, a classified research facility hidden beneath the Nevada desert, and at its heart, an object of unknown origin that defied scientific explanation. She powered on her phone, relieved to find she could now get a signal as they moved further from the facility. The battery indicator showed 8%, enough to make one important call before it died. "Who are you calling?" Dr. Peterson asked as she scrolled through her contacts. "My editor," Sarah replied, finding the number. "I need to tell him I'll be late for that tech conference in Seattle, and that you have a much better story to write." Sarah nodded, looking out at the vast desert landscape passing by the window. "A story about a flight that made an emergency landing at an airport that didn't exist, and what we found beneath it." As the call connected, she couldn't help wondering what was happening back at Copper Basin, and whether the anomaly's unusual activity was merely a coincidence, or somehow connected to their presence. Some questions, she suspected, would remain unanswered, classified beneath layers of government secrecy and buried in the Nevada desert at a place that officially didn't exist. 3 months had passed since the emergency landing of Southwest Flight 2738. Sarah Donovan sat in her Boston apartment, staring at her laptop screen where the final draft of her article was displayed. Outside, snow fell in thick flakes, accumulating on the windowsill and muffling the usual city sounds. The contrast between the winter scene before her and the scorching Nevada desert she'd written about couldn't have been more stark. The article's headline read, "The Flight That Landed Nowhere, Inside America's Hidden Research Frontiers." After weeks of negotiation with government, reviewers, and her editors at The Atlantic, the piece was finally ready for publication. Much had been redacted or modified, particularly specific technical details about the quantum resonance array and the exact location of the facility, but the core of the story remained intact. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Alan Peterson, who had become a friend and occasional research partner in the months since their shared experience. "Saw the final edits. They let more stay than I expected. Call when you can," Sarah smiled. Alan had been invaluable in helping her understand the scientific implications of what they'd witnessed at Copper Basin. translating complex physics concepts into terms she could convey to a general audience. His geological expertise had also helped them piece together the likely location of the facility based on terrain features they'd observed, though they had agreed not to publish these conclusions as part of their security arrangement. She was about to call him when her laptop chimed with an incoming video call request, her editor, Michael Chun. "There she is," Michael greeted her as the connection established. "The journalist who disappeared into the Nevada desert and came back with our most controversial story of the year. It would be more controversial if they'd let me keep all the details," Sarah replied wryly. "That's probably for the best. The legal department is nervous enough as it is." He shuffled some papers on his desk. "The fact-checking team has signed off on everything we could verify independently. The government review came back with surprisingly few additional redactions beyond what we already negotiated. Probably because they know the real secrets remain protected," Sarah mused. "They're letting us publish the outline of the story while keeping the core classified." Michael nodded. "Speaking of classified, have you had any further contact with your friend at the Department of Energy, Dr. Blackwood?" "No, not directly." Sarah glanced at the business card she'd kept pinned to her bulletin. Bored the one with only a phone number that Director Harlow had given them before their departure. She'd never used it. "But I've had 2 visits from agents checking in to make sure I'm honoring the agreement. Very polite, very professional, and very clearly reminding me of my obligations." Intimidation with a smile, Michael remarked. "Classic government approach. They're not wrong to be cautious. Whatever they're studying at Copper Basin goes well beyond conventional science." Sarah hesitated, then added, "Have you received any pressure from above to kill the story?" Michael's expression turned serious. "Not explicitly, but there have been some interesting calls from people who don't usually take an interest in our editorial calendar. Fortunately, the publisher is standing firm on journalistic independence." "I appreciate that," Sarah said sincerely. "We're publishing tomorrow," Michael confirmed. "Are you ready for the response? This is going to generate significant attention." Sarah considered the question. Since returning from Nevada, she'd immersed herself in research studying quantum physics theories, interviewing scientists about advanced energy concepts, and discreetly tracking government research budgets for black projects. She'd also dealt with the practical challenges of explaining her sudden change in career focus to colleagues and family without revealing classified information. "I'm ready," she assured him. "I've triple-checked every fact and statement. There's nothing in the article that violates our agreement with the government review. Even if it does raise questions they'd rather not have asked publicly." After finishing the call with Michael, Sarah closed her laptop and moved to the window, watching the snow accumulate on the street below. Her mind drifted back to the Nevada desert and the strange object suspended in its containment field beneath the mountains. The anomaly, as Dr. Blackwood had called it. She'd honored her agreement not to include specific details about it in her article, but its existence had fundamentally altered her understanding of what remained undiscovered in the world. Her contemplation was interrupted by the buzzing of her phone, an unknown number with a Nevada area code. She answered cautiously. "Miss Donovan? It's Marcus Blackwood." Sarah straightened, surprised. "Dr. Blackwood, I didn't expect to hear from you." "I've been advised of your article's imminent publication," he said, his voice as measured and precise as she remembered. "I wanted to personally verify that our agreement has been honored." "It has," she confirmed. "Your security team has already reviewed the final draft." "Yes, they've reported as much." He paused. "That's not the only reason I'm calling." Sarah waited, sensing there was more. "There have been developments regarding the research subject we discussed during your visit. Developments that may eventually warrant further conversation." Her journalistic instincts immediately sharpened. "What kind of developments?" "Nothing I can discuss over unsecured channels," he replied. "But I wanted you to be aware that your experience at our facility may have more significance than was apparent at the time." "Are you saying the anomaly's activity while we were there wasn't coincidental?" Sarah asked, recalling the alarm that had sounded during their tour. "I'm saying that science often reveals connections where none were previously perceived." His tone remained carefully neutral. "Your article will inevitably generate public interest in our research. Some of that attention may prove valuable from a scientific perspective." Before Sarah could press for clarification, Dr. Blackwood continued. "On an unrelated note, you might find it interesting that air traffic control has implemented new verification protocols for emergency landing coordinates. The system error that directed your flight to our facility has been addressed to prevent similar incidents in the future." "Was it truly a system error?" Sarah asked directly. There was a brief silence before he responded. "Official records indicate it was a database misconfiguration that erroneously listed our runway as Copper Basin Regional Airport." Sarah noted his careful phrasing, not confirming the official explanation, but not directly contradicting it either. "I see," she said, matching his careful tone. "And would these new developments you mentioned have any connection to the unusual activity we witnessed just before our departure?" "Ms. Donovan," Dr. Blackwood's voice took on a warning tone. Our agreement regarding classified information remains in effect regardless of any article publication. Of course, she acknowledged. I'm simply trying to understand the context of your call. Context is precisely what remains classified, he replied. But I believe in maintaining professional relationships, particularly with individuals who have demonstrated both curiosity and discretion. The phone number you were provided remains active should you observe anything that might warrant communication. After the call ended, Sarah sat quietly for several minutes, processing the unexpected contact. Dr. Blackwood's careful wording suggested something significant had occurred involving the anomaly, something potentially connected to their presence at the facility. But what? Her phone buzzed again, this time a text from Captain Eliza Reeves, with whom she'd maintained occasional contact since their shared experience. Just got a strange call about our aviation incident. Someone's nervous about your article. Call me when you can. Sarah was about to reply when she noticed something odd about the text, a faint distortion in the message display, almost like digital static that flickered briefly across the screen before disappearing. She blinked, wondering if she'd imagined it, but then noticed the same effect occurring with the time display at the top of her phone. For a moment, the numbers seemed to shift and blur before settling back to normal. She stared at the screen, waiting to see if it would happen again, but the display remained stable. Weird, she muttered, attributing it to a glitch or perhaps eye strain from hours at her laptop. She sent a quick reply to Eliza promising to call later, then set the phone aside. As evening fell and the snowfall intensified, Sarah found herself drawn to her research materials spread across her dining table, printouts of scientific papers on quantum field theory, notes from her conversations with Dr. Peterson, and the carefully redacted transcript of their tour at Copper Basin that had been returned by the government reviewers. One particular diagram caught her attention, a schematic representation of quantum field interactions that a physicist at MIT had sketched for her during an interview. The pattern of intersecting lines and nodes bore a striking resemblance to something she'd seen before but couldn't immediately place. She studied it carefully, then suddenly remembered it was similar to the pattern she'd glimpsed on the surface of the anomaly just before they were escorted from the containment room, the same pattern that had been echoed in the emblem worn by Director Harlow's staff. On impulse, Sarah retrieved her phone and opened her photo gallery. She hadn't been allowed to take pictures inside the facility, but she still had the images she'd captured of the landing strip before the military arrived. Zooming in on one particular photo showing one of the metal hatches they'd discovered, she studied the markings CBR-17. Something about the numbering system nagged at her. If these were simply sequential access points, why start at 17? Unless... She quickly pulled up an article she'd bookmarked about Department of Energy research initiatives, scanning until she found what she was looking for, a reference to a classification system used for certain types of energy research. Projects were categorized by field of study and potential application, with a numeric designation indicating security clearance level. According to the article, anything classified above level 15 was considered beyond conventional scientific paradigm, a bureaucratic euphemism for research so advanced or unusual that it fell outside mainstream scientific understanding. A level 17 designation would place the Copper Basin research among the most classified projects in the country. As Sarah connected these threads, her apartment lights flickered briefly, coinciding with another strange distortion on her phone screen. This time she was certain she hadn't imagined it. The numbers on her digital clock also fluctuated momentarily before returning to normal. Her first thought was power fluctuations from the snowstorm, but the timing immediately after her realization about the classification system seemed oddly coincidental. On impulse, she picked up her phone and dialed Dr. Peterson. Sarah, he answered immediately. I was just about to call you. Something strange is happening. Your electronics acting up? She asked, suddenly alert. Yes, and more than that. I've been reviewing some geological data from Nevada for a completely unrelated project, and I'm seeing anomalous readings from the exact region where we visited. He was being careful with his wording, clearly concerned about potential monitoring, readings that shouldn't be possible according to conventional geophysics. Sarah moved to her window, pulling back the curtain to look at the snow-covered street. What kind of readings? Gravitational inconsistencies, for lack of a better term. Localized distortions that don't align with any known geological feature. His voice lowered. Sarah, these readings began approximately 3 hours ago, right around the time the government completed its final review of your article. A chill that had nothing to do with the winter weather ran through her. Dr. Blackwood called me earlier. He mentioned developments with their research that might warrant further conversation. That's not coincidence, Alan stated firmly. They've accelerated whatever they were doing with that object. The question is, why now? And why would Blackwood contact you about it? Sarah thought back to the tour, to Dr. Blackwood's unusual decision to show them the anomaly. He said something about public interest potentially being valuable from a scientific perspective. What if they need something that wider attention might provide? Like what? Alan sounded skeptical. I don't know. Funding? Additional researchers? Or ... double. Sarah hesitated, the idea forming as she spoke. What if they're looking for similar phenomena elsewhere? What if our anomaly isn't unique? The line went silent for a moment before Alan responded. That would explain their interest in your article. If there are other anomalies out there, public awareness might lead to reports of similar findings. Exactly, Sarah agreed. Remember how Dr. Blackwood said the object was discovered during a routine geological survey? What if they're hoping my article might prompt people who've encountered similar phenomena to come forward? As they speculated, Sarah noticed the digital distortion affecting her phone screen had intensified, with brief moments where the display seemed to show characters or symbols that didn't belong before returning to normal. Alan, my phone is acting increasingly strange. Are you seeing any unusual effects on your end? Nothing obvious, but he paused. Wait, my computer just glitched, and I'm seeing some odd interference patterns on the monitor. A sudden realization struck Sarah. The quantum field effects they were studying, what if they're not as contained as they claimed? What if whatever they're doing with the anomaly right now is having effects beyond the facility? That's theoretically possible, Alan acknowledged, his scientific caution evident in his tone. Quantum entanglement allows for instantaneous connections regardless of distance. If they've found a way to manipulate quantum fields on a macroscopic scale, it could have wide-ranging effects, Sarah finished, including on electronic systems that rely on quantum properties of materials. Her phone screen flashed again, more dramatically this time, displaying what appeared to be a sequence of symbols before returning to normal. But in that brief moment, Sarah recognized one of the symbols. It matched the geometric pattern she'd seen on the anomaly's surface and on the facility staff's insignia. Alan, I need to call you back, she said suddenly. I'm going to try something. After ending the call, Sarah opened her phone's camera and set it to video mode. She placed it on the table, recording the screen of her laptop where she pulled up her draft article about Copper Basin. For several minutes, nothing unusual happened. Then, as she scrolled to the section describing the quantum resonance array, her laptop screen flickered. The video recording captured what her eyes could only glimpse a momentary overlay of. Symbols and patterns across her digital devices, gone almost as soon as they appeared. Sarah played back the recording, pausing at the moment of distortion. There, frozen on the screen, was a distinct pattern of geometric symbols arranged in a circular configuration, unmistakably similar to what she'd glimpsed on the anomaly. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text. Unknown number, but the Nevada area code was familiar. Quantum resonance cascade detected. Containment protocols engaged. Civilian observation confirmed. Stand by for contact. Before she could process this cryptic message, her phone rang. The special number Director Harlow had provided. Ms. Donovan, came Director Harlow's voice when Sarah answered. Are you currently experiencing any unusual electronic phenomena at your location? Sarah looked at her laptop screen, which had returned to normal. Yes, intermittent distortions on my digital devices. What's happening? A situation has developed at the facility you visited, Director Harlow replied, her typically composed voice now tense. Dr. Blackwood believes you may be uniquely positioned to assist us. Assist you? How? We have reason to believe that your presence during the anomaly's previous activity cycle established a quantum entanglement link. In simple terms, you and Dr. Peterson may have become unintentional observers in a quantum system, affecting it through observation alone. Sarah recalled the alarm that had sounded during their tour, the unusual activity of the anomaly that had coincided with their presence. You're saying we've somehow connected with this object? Sarah asked incredulously. Dr. Blackwood can explain the scientific principles involved. What matters now is that we're detecting resonance patterns at your location that mirror those at our facility. These patterns increased dramatically as you finalized your article about your experience. Sarah's mind raced, trying to process the implications. The article release, you're concerned it might trigger something. We're concerned it might amplify an already developing quantum resonance cascade, Director Harlow corrected. Dr. Blackwood believes your focused attention on the events, combined with the wider attention your article will generate, creates a unique quantum observer effect that could either stabilize or destabilize the anomaly's current state. That sounds like pseudoscience, Sarah countered, though the evidence of strange effects on her electronics suggested otherwise. 3 months ago, you stood in a facility you were never meant to see and observed an object of unknown origin that defies conventional physics, Director Harlow replied evenly. Perhaps you should consider expanding your definition of what constitutes science. Before Sarah could respond, her apartment lights flickered violently, then stabilized at a slightly dimmer setting. Outside, she noticed the streetlights doing the same. What do you need me to do? She asked, setting aside her skepticism in the face of increasingly undeniable phenomena. We're sending a secure transport to your location. Dr. Blackwood believes your direct presence at the facility may be necessary to stabilize the current situation. Dr. Peterson is already en route from Chicago. You want me to return to Nevada right now? Ms. Donovan, what's happening extends beyond national security concerns. The quantum phenomena we're observing have potential implications for fundamental physical constants throughout a much wider radius than our facility. In non-technical terms, the fabric of reality in your vicinity is experiencing stress patterns that mirror those at our location. The gravity of the situation suddenly became clear. This wasn't just about classified research or government secrets anymore. I'll be ready, Sarah decided, but I want full disclosure this time. No more partial truths or convenient redactions. Circumstances have rendered our previous security protocols somewhat irrelevant. Director Harlow acknowledged with what might have been a hint of dark humor. A car will arrive at your location in approximately 20 minutes. Bring only essential personal items. After ending the call, Sarah moved quickly around her apartment, gathering a few changes of clothes, her laptop, research notes, and essential toiletries into a small duffel bag. As she worked, the electronic disturbances continued intermittently, clocks displaying impossible times, her phone showing brief text in unfamiliar characters, her laptop screen occasionally rippling as though the digital display itself had become liquid. She texted her editor, "Emergency situation. May need to delay article publication. Will explain when I can." His response came quickly. "Government pressure? We can push back if needed." "Not pressure," she replied. "Something else. Trust me on this. 24-hour hold on publication. Critical." Sarah zipped her bag closed just as her phone buzzed with a notification. "Secure transport arrived at your location." Looking out the window, she saw a black SUV with tinted windows parked directly below, its headlights cutting through the falling snow. A figure emerged from the vehicle, not the government agent she expected, but Dr. Marcus Blackwood himself, looking up at her window with an expression of urgent determination. As she grabbed her coat and bag, Sarah realized that whatever had begun 3 months ago with an emergency landing on a runway that wasn't supposed to exist had never really ended. The anomaly, whatever it was, had established a connection that transcended physical distance, drawing her back into its mysterious influence. Her final act before leaving the apartment was to send one more text to Alan Peterson, heading back to CB with Blackwood. "Electronic phenomena increasing. Whatever the anomaly is, I think it's been waiting for us to return." She slipped her phone into her pocket just as another wave of distortion rippled across its screen. This time, rather than random symbols, a clear message appeared briefly before fading. "Observer effect confirmed. Quantum entanglement complete. Welcome back, Sarah Donovan." The message disappeared as quickly as it had come, leaving her staring at a normal phone screen. But as she headed downstairs to meet Dr. Blackwood and returned to the facility hidden beneath the Nevada desert, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that nothing about this situation was normal and that whatever awaited her at Copper Basin would fundamentally change her understanding of reality itself. The story of Flight 2738 and its emergency landing at an airport that didn't exist had been just the beginning. The true revelation, whatever it might be, still awaited discovery. Buried beneath the desert and connected across thousands of miles by quantum links that science was only beginning to comprehend. As she stepped out into the snowy night and approached Dr. Blackwood, Sarah felt not fear but a profound sense of purpose. Whatever the anomaly was, whatever intelligence or phenomenon it represented, it had chosen her as an observer. And now, it seemed, the time had come to understand why.